Hey everyone, Miss Folk here, and we are going to go ahead and do a review on proportions this week. So to start off, we have set up proportions for the following scenarios 4 different ways each. And then I did say you can use a calculator, but that's not going to apply until we get to the problems down here, okay? So for our first way here, we have 8 markers costs $12.50. How much would 5 markers cost? So one way we could go about setting up a proportion, we could say that we know our 8 markers costs $12.50. So I'm going to keep all of that over to the left. That's our known side. And over here on the right, I want to know how much 5 markers would cost. So since I did markers over cost on the left, I'm going to do this exact same thing on the right. So here I would have 5 markers, and then that's going to be over our X because we don't know how much that costs, okay? And I'll go ahead and color code this. Again, we want to figure out how much that X is, and that's related to our 5 markers, and we know our 8 markers is $12.50. So instead of setting it up this way, instead of having markers over money, we can also do money over markers, and we still would get the same exact answer. So this time I'm going to start with my $12.50 on the top. We know that's going to get us 8 markers. And then over here on the right, again, I have an X for my amount of money for 5 markers. And again, I'll go ahead and color code that as well. We still have our yellows on the left and our greens on the right. Now, another way we can go about doing this, instead of having all the yellows on the left and all the greens on the right, we can split it up. So I'm going to go ahead and say $12.50 is going to be my top number. And I'm going to actually do money over money is going to equal markers over markers. So $12.50 is going to be over X. And then since I started with my $12.50 on the top, that's related to my 8 markers. So I'm going to put my 8 on the top and then my 5 on the bottom. So again, I did money equals markers. Okay, and you could have done markers equals money. That's just how I personally chose to set this one up. And again, if we're going to color code it, this time we have all of our green ones on the bottom and all of our yellow ones on the top. So as long as you're keeping everything that's related on one side somehow, you're going to be good to go. All right, and then again, for our fourth one, I'm going to just flip it up and down. So I'm going to start with X on the top over $12.50 on the bottom is going to equal 5 over 8. And again, I'm still doing money equals markers. And for color coding again, I have $12.50 and 8 are related. They're on the bottom. And then I have X and 5 on the top. Okay? So looking down at numbers 2 and 3, I'm going to have you guys do these ones on your own. Whoa, I'm not spelling anything right. On own. And when you turn this in, I will go ahead and check those 2 answers, okay? And there's more than 4 ways technically to write these, okay? So if you're not feeling confident, still keep it on your paper, and I will give it a check. So for this next one, this is really the only new type of thing. You've actually learned it, but I'm going to go ahead and do all 3 ways here for us. We learned it all 3 of these throughout the year rather than during our proportion unit. So remember, whenever we're solving for n on a proportion, most of you chose to do the circle method on the test, if I remember correctly. And what you do, you always start on the side that has your variable. So I'm going to go ahead and start with my 10 and move in my circular motion here. And for your circle method, you're always going to follow this same pattern. You're going to start by dividing, then multiply, and then your equal sign. So again, I'm going to go ahead and label that here on my circle. And I'm going to start off with 10 divided by 8. And then I'm going to go ahead and multiply that by 36. And that's going to equal my n. So with the calculator, you can go ahead and do this part. 10 divided by 8, we would get 1.25. And then we're going to multiply that by 36. And 1.25 times 36 is 45. So your final answer here is going to be n equals 45. So that's your circle method. Now, another method we could do, and we did learn about, and some of you chose to use it, is cross multiplying. Okay. Now, cross multiplying is probably the best way to go. I personally think you're going to use it a lot more later in high school, so it's good to get in the habit of using this now. But again, if you like that circle method, I'm fine with you using it. So I'm going to go ahead and rewrite my proportion here. We have 8 over 36 is equal to 10 over n. And with your cross multiplication, remember, all you're going to do is make an x here, and you're going to be multiplying. So in my orange, I have 36 times 10, because again, we are multiplying. And that's going to equal 8 times n. So I'm going to go ahead, I'll color code that again here. I'm going to go ahead and simplify that. So 36 times 10 is 360, and that's going to equal our 8n. And now this is just like you guys have been doing for the last few weeks, solving for n. So how do you undo multiplying by 8? You divide by 8. So 360 divided by 8, you can go ahead and check that on your calculator, but we do get 45 equal to n again. So since we got that both ways here, up here and down here, we clearly are doing the problem right, okay? And for our final method here, there's not really a name for it, okay? But again, I'm going to go ahead and rewrite my proportion here. And anytime you're doing a proportion, we can also think of this as how did we get from one number to the other? So how did we get from 8 to 10? That's not an even number, okay? Normally, like if we had from 2 to 6, we could say we multiplied by 3. But for 8 to 10, that's a little bit trickier. But remember, you can always use a fraction. So 8 times, we want 10 to be our answer, so I'm going to put 10 over here. And I'm going to put that 10 over 8, because remember, this 8 is technically 8 over 1. And if I multiply it by a fraction with itself on the bottom, those are going to cancel. So 8 times 10 over 8 equals 10, okay? Hopefully that I think I explained that in a kind of confusing way, but hopefully seeing it will help you out, okay? So since we know 8 times 10 over 8 is going to give us that 10, okay, whatever we do on the top, we're going to have to do on the bottom. So I'm going to take that 36 and multiply it by 10 over 8. And again, that 36 is technically just over 1. So 36 times 10 is 360. 1 times 8 is just 8. Now we have 360 over 8, or 360 divided by 8, and we do get 45 again. So regardless of which way you go about solving this, again, I don't mind which way you do, you should get the same answer, okay? All right, now for these next two, we're going to do the first one here together. It says express each phrase as a rate and a unit rate. For this first one, for just our rate, we have 6 inches of rain in 2 months. So there's 2 different ways we could go about writing this as a rate. We could go ahead and do it as a fraction, so 2 inches over 6 inches over 2 months, or we could do 2 months over 6 inches, or we can write this as a ratio, so 6 inches to, with our colon, 2 months. Now, for a unit rate, remember, unit rate just means that we need to have one of our numbers in our ratio be 1, okay? So we can either change that months to 1, or we could change our inches to 1. I'm going to go ahead and choose to do months. So how would I get that 2 to become 1? With dividing. Remember, anything divided by itself is 1, so I'm going to go ahead and divide by 2 on both sides here. And I would get 3 inches to 1 month. So that's my unit rate, okay? And again, we could technically change the inches into 1 if we wanted. So how would you get inches to be 1? How would you change that 6? You divide by 6, and we'd have to do that on both sides. So we could say 1 inch to 6 months, okay? We could technically say it that way as well. I personally like this one since we're dealing with just whole numbers though. So I'm going to say you do number 10 on your own, and then I will go ahead and check that, and we're going to do these last 2 together here. So for our first problem, we have a restaurant has 25 tables. If the ratio of tables to chairs is 5 to 10, how many chairs does the restaurant have? And again, from above, we saw that we can write a ratio as a fraction. So I'm going to go ahead and set up a proportion. So we have the ratio of tables to chairs. So we know that 5 is tables and 10 is chairs. So I have 5 tables over 10 chairs is going to equal, here we see that we have 25 tables. So again, since I had tables on the top here, I'm going to do tables on the top on the right side as well. And we're looking for how many chairs in the total, or how many total chairs in the restaurant. So that's going to be our x. So again, I'm actually going to have you guys go ahead and solve for x here. I don't care what of the 3 methods you use that we learned up here, but I'll go ahead and check your answer, okay? And for our last problem here, we have our grocery cart has 36 items in it. If 21 are frozen, what is the ratio of non-frozen to frozen? Right in simplest terms. So even though this is really wordy, it's actually a pretty simple problem. We know that we have 36 items and 21 are frozen. So to figure out how many aren't frozen, we're just going to do 36 minus 21. And we're going to get 15 non-frozen. So since we want to write a ratio of non-frozen to frozen, okay, our first number is going to be that 15, which is our non-frozen, and our 21 is going to be our frozen. So our ratio is going to be 15 to 21, but since it says write in simplest terms, we have to figure out what number goes into both of those, and hopefully you can see that 3 does. So if we divide both sides by 3, we'll get 5 to 7. And again, you can label. So 5 non-frozen to 7 frozen, okay? So if you have any questions at all, please let me know. And I think that's all I got for you.